Hi, everyone, and welcome back to that UFO podcast. My name is Andy, and joined for a breakdown is the OG of the breakdown podcast shows, Dan Zetterstrom, soon to be host of his own show, depending on when this is coming out tomorrow, so I think we're fine. But we'll get into that. Dan, welcome back.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's been a big week for UAP stuff. We haven't seen each other for a bit to talk about this, so we're going to be talking about it for the first time now. And I actually have a bit of surprise for you.
Oh,
One of your listeners sent me a gift to wear whilst we record, and he asked me to just do it whilst we're on camera. So just to
oh my
level out
God.
the chat.
Do you know what? You've got about 5 seconds before I cut that off. So put that hoodie back on, please. We're recording this the day after the night before, whatever you want to call it. The hearings happened 9th of September, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. UK, wherever you are around the world. And do you know what? Dan, as always, we haven't spoken about our thoughts
Nope.
yet on the hearing at all. Not even messaged about it. Really quick thoughts are the hearing was great. There's an issue from it that has arisen that I suppose I've got to say has tainted it a little bit, and we'll get to that. But very quick reaction for TikTok. Um, Probably, and we'll get to this at the end, but it's close second to the Grush hearing. Um, Probably quite a lot better than the others we've had so far. And obviously, me and you are going to go over the details. But what were your kind of immediate reactions before we discuss it and ruin it for ourselves?
Well, I watched it way after it happened, like the day after, so I've been free of the hype like last time. And I really enjoyed it. I would say I agree. Second to the Grush hearings, all three kind of weave together, and we finally got a little bit of visual progress of what's happening with Grush now as well in his grizzled Batman phase, should we say?
Yeah, hovering in the background of the hearings. So, Dan, what we'll do is we'll go through it kind of as we normally do, chronologically, and just share our thoughts on what happened. Very quickly to recap, folks, in case you're listening to this and you haven't seen or heard the hearings or the reaction pod I done yesterday. We had our witnesses, Jeff Nucitelli. I've been calling him Nucitelli, but it's Nucitelli. Um, I put Chief Alexandro Wiggins, George Knapp, Dylan Borland, and Joe Spielberger. Knapp, I think before it, Dan, was the one where a lot of people were like, George Knapp being there, why have we got a journalist again? We want military folks, we want scientists who've worked with the craft and all that kind of stuff. And we'll get to why that maybe doesn't happen given the whole purpose of the hearing. I think Knapp came out this really well. I don't know what your take is on that one.
Yeah, Nap did really well. He has so much experience in this field. He's been doing this for decades, and agree or disagree with certain pieces where he's put forward. It's very clear that he's dedicated to the issue and he's been working real hard. And he, in this hearing, named names, which I'm excited to talk about when we get to it.
Yeah. What I'll say is on the recap I done yesterday, I went through the statements and gave the gist of what everyone spoke about. Do you want to do that now again, or do you think we'll get
Yeah,
into it?
I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's we can let's just do it as we go. Let's go through chronologically, and then people who maybe didn't hear that or just want to hear what we kind of pull from each of the statements. Yeah, we can do that. But before we
Cool.
before we start, can I just say how strange it was? I don't know if you saw on social media. There were a few things that were going on with just people being at the hearing. And the night before they had this mixer, and present was Colonel Carl Nell, also Jaime Maswan, Stephen Greer. He was even mentioned in these hearings. So it's such a strange mix of people, and it's really just wonderful to see everyone kind of put their differences aside and just all start trying to pull in the same direction. Also, Matthew Brown, the whistleblower that was mentioned in the last hearings for the Immaculate Constellations documents, he was present at these hearings. He was sat right behind George Knapp. So, previous hearing, he was spoken about. This hearing, he sat behind George Knapp. Is he going to be in the chair in the next hearing? He's getting closer.
maybe start off with a bit of a controversial talking point then. I say controversial, it's only controversial if you want it to be. So you've brought up the kind of mixer that happened the night before, okay?
Sure.
And is there an argument there? I'll just put out there that part of the issue with some of the negativity that comes from the hearings and these events and just the subject from a political point of view is there are too many cooks involved. And not to jump ahead too much, but when you've got Eric Burlison with David Grush behind him, mixing with Danny Sheehan, Jaime Maussan, and then quoting Stephen Greer, is that not potentially an issue itself? I know in one way you can look at it as I'm getting the best of all worlds, Kellogg's variety pack of cereal, but also there's a real blending of the palette there that I don't know if that necessarily is conducive to real progress and going forward. I always used to use the Elizondo Sheehan scale. I think I might change it to the Greer scale. I'll change it to the Grush Greer scale because it's more illiterate. Grush on one end, Greer on the other. Is there not an issue there potentially?
Yeah, there's potentially conflicts, right, between the stories they're telling people. I'm choosing to look at it as, okay, we're just looking at all the kinds of evidence, similar to what OSAP had to do back in the day. They even went to World Weekly News and they had to just use what was available. But it's certainly jarring seeing, Stephen Greer's week to week on his podcast saying that Washington isn't helping, that, Elizondo and all of the people that Elizondo works with, plants, and yet here he is shoulder to shoulder with them. I think that this rhetoric from people like Greer kind of needs to change if we want to look at a situation like this and see the positive in it instead of the potential conflicts. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm also a little uncomfortable at the public spectacle of these hearings
Oh,
and the rush for it to be UFO celebrity who can get inside the building. Um, rather does that take away and make it more of a spectacle rather than the content of what it is? And it's just like let's focus on the witnesses, the hearings, what it's for, and what it can accomplish, as opposed to making it a show.
yeah. These things kind of often become shows, right? And one of the reasons I'm only 3 hours from DC, one of the reasons I didn't drive up is because of that spectacle. Like there's so many people that I know there, and that would have overshadowed the day for me in terms of it being about the whistleblowers. And so, the purest thing to do with these hearings is to just listen to the hearing, watch it online. I probably got a better view online than I did sitting in that room. And I didn't have to
Mm.
queue from 11 p.m. the night before to get in there. There's certainly a kind of weird, I guess, celebrity kind of and groups kind of coming around these hearings. And again, I don't know if that's to the detriment or to the its benefit, but we'll see going forward. I guess.
Yeah. Maybe it's a good thing. It's all going to be subjective, isn't it? Luna kicked off with a statement. I think the big talking point from that is going to be she called out publicly Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, former head of Arrow, as a documented liar.
Yeah.
There seems to be no love lost there. And I imagine there may have been conversations in the background that's helped contribute towards that. I don't think Luna has just learned about the UFO community's distaste or distrust of Sean Kirkpatrick. There seems to be some real animosity and bad blood there, and that comes up later on. She mentioned about senior officials lending their weight behind the credibility of your Grushes, your Fravors, the people coming forward to name names and the weight of their testimony based on their service, what they've been doing, the type of people they are, and how important that is coming from real high ranking officials, probably ties into the whole age of disclosure debate. And again, if that could have been coming out right round about now, that would have been really good. Because those people are part of that documentary and it's still kind of nowhere to be seen. But yeah, Luna's
Uh,
statement was fine, yep.
I wonder if Age of Disclosure will be updated with people like Borland now. That it's quite an amazing testimony that he brought, and the last thing we want is for that movie to just be out of date, right? There are a whole bunch of new politicians involved. You know, Jasmine Crockett came in today, and she was a bit of a firecracker. Really reminded me a lot of how AOC was at the early UFO hearings, where she was less talking about UFOs and more talking about problems with overclassification in the government and
Yeah.
structural issues that affect the UFO issue and so many other issues too. So I think for the neutral people out there, like she's going to be their way into this, whereas Luna, Burchett, Burlison, they've clearly been in this for a long time and have a lot more to say because they've seen a lot more and spoken to a lot more people. But I think the takeaway from Luna's opening statement is to remember like that's what we're judging this hearing by. What were their aims? What did they get out of the witnesses to help with those aims? And I think this one for me appears to be all about whistleblower protection and structures that allow reporting of disinformation and tracking it transparently with the public and the service members that report it.
Yeah, and just to remind you that the title of the hearing, folks, is Restoring Public Trust Through UAP Transparency and Whistleblower Protection. So there is a reason and rhyme to what they're doing and the people involved in it and the conversations. It's not blowing the lid off the UFO topic, unfortunately, is not the title of the hearing.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Real quick while you're there. So that title is really provocative because it seems to suggest that if they come clean about the UFO issue, then we'll trust them on everything else. Would it work that way for you? It certainly wouldn't for me.
Don't know. It sounds like a bit of a thick think tanky or group chat. Okay, guys, no idea is a bad idea. Let's throw out what are we calling this? What are the buzzwords we have to use? Where are the public at? Oh, there's a lack of trust, lack of transparency. Good. Let's get those words in there. And they've put it together. I'm nonplussed about it's like calling a program ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Cool, UFOs. Whatever.
Yeah, sure.
I'm
program.
not too fussed on it, and what they call it. More about the content. And again, not to jump too far ahead, I fear there's an element of how good a lot of the content was being lost on a little bit of the sizzle instead of the
shiny
state
stuff. It distracted.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's go.
And then you mentioned Crockett in her statement. Yeah, cool, very grounded, down to earth. Did touch on like NASA not finding anything for Arrow being formed, and I like that she mentioned, a lot of reports are explainable. Misidentifications, balloons, etc. But we need to track down each UAP. So it's not good enough just to say that some are explainable. There are videos and photographs and testimonies that point to things that aren't explainable. And that was a nice way for her to kind of put that in there. Like you say, it was very grounded, and I think that's required in these things too. Otherwise, it can be too much sensationalism.
Yeah. I'm surprised that she mentioned the NASA thing, that NASA didn't find anything, because they didn't look. Like what they did was look at how they would study it. They didn't study it. So to say they didn't find anything makes it sound like they actually investigated, and that was never what they did and never what they said they were going to do.
At high level, bit staffery, someone
Sure, maybe that's what she's saying. Sure.
I'm really sorry for this really unprofessional note, but I just found Miss Titus was basically giving a great career retrospective of George Knapp, gave him a glowing reference, and she was fanboying out a little bit on George. I'm not complaining, but it was just like, oh my god, it's George Knapp.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone else, one of the witnesses, said that they'd watched all George Knapp stuff as well. So he was a bit of a celebrity in this one, I think. And yeah, she just waxed lyrical about how much she loved him. I didn't even write any notes. I just, she loved George. Cool.
Good. So it wasn't just me, and I was pretty much paying attention throughout the whole thing as well. So, so yeah, they go on to read their statements. Dan, Jeff Nusatelli. Again, I'm checking it. Nusatelli reads his statement. I've got some notes here. Again, former US military police officer, 16 years service. He emphasised Americans having the right and responsibility to know the truth about UAP. I don't want to go through tons of detail on the statements because there's a lot of questions and stuff to get through as well.
Yeah.
talked about the Vandenberg Air Force Base incident, the huge red square in October 2003, hovering over the missile defence areas, drifting east. He collected the testimony from folks on the base at that time. Talked about, the statements from people. It's coming right at us now. It's right here.
Very
Objects
Rendlesham
vanishing.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of got like an almost tone and a pattern to some of those sightings from a
Yeah.
military base point of view. Definitely. Um, Lights coming from over the ocean. Armed response units mobilised. Talked about his own sighting later on as well. Jeff is really professional. I think he spoke well. I don't think even the weakest witness at this hearing would have been out of place in the previous hearing that we had, because I think they all kind of contributed something here. And I think Jeff was one that some folks I've seen online were perhaps a little more not worried about, but felt it wasn't impactful because we knew his story. He'd been on podcasts. We wanted surprise witnesses. We wanted new information. We wanted new testimony. But no, I thought Jeff held up his own. Anything to add on the statement stuff, Dan?
Yeah, just that I love that Jeff emphasized, and all the others did too. But Jeff, started off on the right foot by saying that he had three goals by coming to testify, and that is that they should fund independent research into UFOs, they should end secrecy and overclassification, and they should protect the witnesses because that emboldens others to come forward. Now I'm looking at my notes at Chief Wiggins, and I can't get embiggens the smaller spirit out of my head from The Simpsons. But yeah, emboldens others to come forward, and that's what we need. These people there to just share their experience as people with UFO events in their lives who feel that they have had negative consequences as a result of that. And Jeff fits right in there.
Yep. We move on to Chief Alexandro Wiggins. He was on Weaponized back in April, sharing his story of his the event at the USS Jackson, which occurred in 2023. Talks about that area off the coast of Southern California. Dan, very popular. I'm
Yep.
wearing my Monsters of California hoodie again, just for the occasion. He
I went
talks
there
about
too, and
yeah, you've
witnessed a whole
been to
bunch
the
of people
area.
freaking out about Starlink. They didn't know what it was. It was a big Starlink trail going over, and they just decided, I don't know what it is, so it's fine. And I was like, if you don't know what it is, that looks even crazier.
Mm. What
But yeah,
What do
they
you
didn't care.
think of that area in general? That whole rumored watery base type place.
Well, the underwater base that keeps going around, that's been found to just be a rock formation, like a natural rock formation that had a weird low resolution scan way back when. But that area does seem to have a lot of activity, and it seems to have a lot of lava tubes as well that go into the earth and under the
That's what
islands.
I mean more than the a
Sure.
static, but these things go there and seem to be
Yeah,
at least entering the water, don't they?
regularly. And one argument to be made is that this is a staging area. When you go there, you could see all of the warships. These massive Navy vessels, and I'd seen pictures, but it didn't prepare me for how big these things were. They were so imposing. It was crazy, and there were
Mm.
so many of them. So this is where you would want to send something to spy on some stuff if you were an adversary. But also, if you were an adversary that was unknown and coming from somewhere else, that would also be where you send something. And it's quite far out as well. To get from the mainland to Catalina, you're looking at like an hour and a half ferry ride. So it's not like you can just see the island off the coast and go there in like 20 minutes. That is a big stretch of water, and it's real deep. And so it would just be a prime staging area for anything coming in that wanted to investigate.
Yeah, and so he talked about the Tic Tac shaped object emerging from the ocean in 2023, transmedium event, joined by three similarly shaped craft, all four departed, near simultaneous acceleration, no sonic boom, no visible propulsion, all the classic earmarks of those events, disappeared from radar immediately. He also talked about multiple sensor systems picking this up as well. So, yeah, a lot of potentially really good data to be had from that. I think Wiggins spoke really well. He was quite happy to, like all of them, not overly speculate. I think he kept himself pretty reserved at times, without being boring about it. He wasn't going into, oh yeah, it's aliens. Borland perhaps went a little bit further in skirting around the language, but I thought Wiggins presented himself incredibly well. He urged Congress to improve UAP detection, reporting, and analysis protocols. Um, Do you think, Dan, sometimes and tell me if I'm wrong, right? Do we feel things have moved forward too much in terms of the stigma reduced, the reporting's getting better, when we hear a couple of folks coming forward, when it seems you've got people still coming out and saying it needs to be better, more needs to be done? Is it just a case of like the movement started to improve, but we maybe give it too much credence sometimes, and there's still real difficulty in getting these folks to come forward easily?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. From where we were pre-2017, a crazy amount of stuff has happened. We've had UFO hearings, there's guidance now, there are yearly reports coming out, and it's kind of almost like being deprived of water and then given like a really small cup of water, and you're very
Yeah,
thankful. It's Stockholm
it's the
syndrome, right?
basics. It's the basics, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we are. Like, yes, I'm thankful that all this stuff has happened, and we're definitely further along than we have been. UFOs are more popular and accepted than they have ever been, arguably. But at the same time, it's clearly not good enough, and we haven't got the protections that we need. And part of that, I think, is that when you hear about these reprisals, you just kind of, you think of the movies you've seen, like, unless you've had these experiences of people leaving things on, say a kitchen table and saying like, hey, I can come get you when I want, or intimidating family members and stopping you getting work and blacklisting you from certain
Mm,
organizations, you're not going to really grok the effect that that has on people. And there's only a certain amount that legislation can do. Like I can write protect whistleblowers on paper all I want, but unless it goes further than the protections they've got now, which are just congressional protections, Luna's not going to be there protecting Wiggins from someone that breaks into his house with a gun.
mm.
And so there's a seriousness to this that means those protections have to be expanded greatly, because the reach of Congress is just, I think we're seeing it. It's weak. It's too weak to do anything about this. And then add into that all the political turmoil about choosing sides and bending the knee and so on and so forth. It just it means that the stuff we have isn't good enough, and we have to keep pushing.
Yeah. Next up was George Knapp's testimony. He needs almost no introduction. Reporter at KLS
Who?
TV in Vegas. Um, he has been investigating this since the late 80s. He brought the Lazar story to the fore. Lazar got name dropped pretty early on, which was interesting to hear. I think it was almost a bingo card of will we hear the Lazar name come up or not. Probably had to. Lazar. Knapp went a bit off script though, didn't he? Because he was like, everyone was reading their statements in that opening, and Knapp kind of went, "Look, you've got my statement," but he just started rambling and chatting in a good way, just
his
about some
statement
stuff
was
that was going to come up.
his statement was really long as well. So I think
Yeah,
he just didn't have the time to
he
read the
didn't
whole
have five
thing.
minutes.
So he was trying to hit the bullet points. He needed ChatGPT next to him to be like, summarize this for me and let me speak it.
Yeah, and read it in his voice.
Yeah.
But the statement talked about the Lazar S4, the S4 story. It mentions Harry Reid. We get the OSAP programs brought up. Robert Bigelow, 240,000 UAP case files. James Lukatsky. A lot of this stuff comes back up again as Knapp gets asked questions throughout the hearing. It touches on his Soviet era UFO program stuff, which was really interesting. Quite interesting to hear. I suppose in retrospect, I thought about this less at the time. Hearing so much chat about Russia and the USSR and their work on this in an open congressional hearing in the United States, which I wonder how that's gone down over there, which is difficult to
Yeah.
really get any kind of reaction to that. It's not as if we
Either
can just ask our Russian UFO podcasting colleagues, or it's not really like that, is it?
either they're going to be in full blown panic, or someone's getting a pay rise because their misinformation they put out worked very well. One of the
Yeah.
two.
Yeah, they mention things like Thread 3, which is like the biggest, I think George Knapp said probably the biggest in the world UFO program for data collection. It had sub programs underneath it. A lot of cool stuff. George Knapp came off this hearing really well, and I think he had a lot to lose in terms of the UFO community's credibility in this for those who support him and like him, and would have had probably more wolves ready to jump on him because of his background and who he is. So fair play to George coming out of this like a champ, as
Yeah,
they all
he
did.
he he did so good, just controlling that like we've been saying, I guess, celebrity aspect of it,
Yeah,
and just keeping it real down to earth and just saying like, look, these are the facts. In this opening statement, he said that the paper trail is compelling, and this is something we all have said, right, across the board. Even debunkers, they say, yeah, sure, we can't find the proof that they think UFOs are real, but we can definitely find the paperwork to show that they're messing with the public's perception of what's there and what isn't, and how seriously they take it behind the scenes. And I think that's the takeaway there. The threat 3 stuff was really interesting. For anyone in the community, it's not new. These documents have been out there and around. I work with the Sun newspaper in the UK. Boo to them. A couple of years back to give them the documents, and they wrote a good article on it. So there are a few things out there if you want to find out what's in those documents beyond what George said in the hearing, because they would have taken a whole day to read easily.
yeah. And fair play to George. Like, I love the fact George Knapp, for all his status in the journalist community, his office looks like shit. If you've famously seen his show,
Yes.
it's just boxes and paper everywhere. I love that on his desk next to him in the hearing, it was just a pile of fucking paper, not even organized neatly, just like ready to go through it at any moment. So
Yeah,
yeah,
he has no doubt so much stuff, and I always think of it when people bring up the video of Element 115 that Lazar gave him, and he says, "I can't find it," and I'm like, I won't be able to find it and all that stuff either.
yeah,
He's just got a lot of paperwork he wants to keep, but
yeah.
his office
It's
does look really cool in a Mulder-esque FBI basement X-Filesy type way.
until you need to use it practically, in which case you can't fucking find anything you
Yeah.
need. But yeah, hat tip to George. Dylan Borland, I think, was the witness who had the most intrigue for me, and I think plenty of folks coming into this, Dan. I'll find out from yourself in a second. I checked LinkedIn the day his name got announced and kind of found he was a former US Air Force geospatial intelligence specialist from 2010 to 2013. He had post-service at BAE Systems and Intrepid Solutions. His specialisations were in analysing advanced video, radar and electrical optical imagery for aerial operations. And yep, he is a federal whistleblower, having given testimony to the Inspector General and Arrow back in March 2023. I think he said he came forward to them, so over 2 and a bit years ago. And I think that's something in all of this, if you can get a bit lost in this sometimes, if days or weeks or months can be a bit heavy, if people or groups let you down, things don't go the way you want them to, there are things happening in the background that we don't know and don't hear about. So there was this guy who we're going to go through what he said and how well he's come out of this, that 2.5 years ago first reported things and started the ball rolling, and only now you're getting to hear from Dylan Borland. Shared his own incident that happened in summer 2012 at Langley Air Force Base. He saw a 100-foot equilateral triangle hovering near the hangar. 100 feet above him, it interfered with his telephone. There was no sound, visible disturbance. I think Daniel have really enjoyed, I'm guessing, his description of the craft, like almost like a black paint job, but a glowing aura of different colours. I can't remember, gold and a couple of others, he said, going over the craft like an alive skin.
Yeah, sure. He went on into it a little bit later as well. People were asking questions about it, and he was talking about it being like almost lava. And we've heard that before. It's the Chuck Clark video and countless other sightings that there seems to be material on this craft that's living or shedding or interacting with the atmosphere and doing something. Or what we're seeing is potentially, I guess, folks would be thinking, well, there's a bubble around it, so it's distorting kind of what's inside, so it might look like it's alive on the surface. Yeah, common thing in all these kind of craft reports. He also used the phrase technologies of unknown origin, which is something that's been coming up again and again, little bits over the past couple of years, starting with Debrief. And it was great to see it here again, because it touches on the whole weasel language aspect that they get into a little later on, that we'll talk
Yep.
to when we get there.
Yeah, and then skipping on to Joe Spielberger was a last-minute witness. He was added in the day before that was reported on. He is a senior policy counsel at Project on Government Oversight, or POGO. He was added to the roster, like I say, 24 hours before the session. His presence was there for whistleblower protections and transparency, talking about how they weren't just timely topics but urgent priorities for the hearings organisers. And I think he brought a real kind of staunch seriousness to the proceedings. He wasn't the go-to guy for the UFO chat. He was there to talk about whistleblowers, protections, legalities, laws, policies, and kind of just keep things running a certain way when things came back to him. It seems to be really experienced. Talks about, whistleblowers often bring light to government misconduct. Some of the things brought up, I felt he made a really, it was Spielberger, it may have been in his statement or not, about the issue whistleblowers have is quite often the reporting processes are the people they are whistleblowing against are the people they have to go and
Yes.
report it to, and that's not, that's like the old when you go to your boss at work and they say, "Oh, I'm also HR," and they write your report down but then shred it next to you as well. I got that kind of feeling from it, and made some really clear points that even idiots like me can understand, which I appreciated. He urged Congress to reaffirm bipartisan support for whistleblowers regardless of political leanings, prioritise evidence over individual narratives, and strengthening whistleblower protections, he argued, is fundamental to good government governance and public trust. Interestingly, while that was happening, I noticed Dean Johnson had tweeted out to say that the UAP Disclosure Act wasn't included
Yes.
going into the NDAA. That's through the House, is that right? But the Senate can still include it?
Yes. So the House has to choose to include it, the Senate has to choose to include it, and then after that, they go into conference where it can also be brought in as something that was missed, and then it goes to the president's desk around December. So just because it's not introduced in the House, it's not the end of days for it, but it just doesn't bode well because it looks like there's some tomfoolery going on behind the scenes still.
Yeah. Shall we get into it then, Dan?
Yeah, I just want to touch on one thing just before we crack on.
Go.
And it was a tiny moment, but it was a sea change in how whistleblowers and UFO witnesses have been treated for decades since this whole issue came out. Did you notice that Luna actually apologized to the witnesses? And I think that is probably the first apology that any whistleblowers have received from the government officially. And I'm hoping that that kind of compassion just carries on. I bet there are so many service members out there, Bob Jacobs, people like that. They love an apology. They haven't got it. Arrow just made them out to be kooks or wrong or change their story. They all need an apology, and props to Luna for doing that.
Yes. Burlison did finish the entire thing that ran 2.5 hours by saying, "Enough talking, it's time for action." So I will just add that in there, that it's nice to get the apology, but stuff needs to happen off the back of it.
Yes, words and
So
actions.
yeah, Luna, questions first, Dan. They add a few other folks in, but again, I'm not going to get into huge detail in every single moment because it was a 2.5 hour long hearing, folks. So
Let's just
they
read the
get,
transcript.
oh
We'll
God,
do
can you
voices and
imagine?
everything.
So I couldn't. I think I'm still tired today from that yesterday. If folks haven't seen it or don't know how these things work, it's an interesting structure, isn't it, Dan? That so I'll be like, okay, Dan, you're here, Graham here, Dave, you're here. Everyone gets 5 minutes to ask questions. You can also give up part of your time. So if Dan has like 2 minutes and then still left at the end of his, he can give it back. Or as we find later on, some folks were only there to give their time back, I think, to other congressmen and women who had more questions to ask. So
Which I
it's,
think in previous episodes we said we wanted them to do that, right? Because the questions are so bitty when they're broken up into 5-minute things. We were like, yeah, it would be
yeah.
better if there were just two people asking constant questions.
If Luna's on a roll and she gets to 5 minutes and she wants to follow up, she can't. She has to hand it over to someone else, and it's just
Yeah.
a little bit old hat with these things. But it's the world of politics, isn't it? So again, what I've got here, Dan, for Luna's questions, she asked Borland about the size of the triangular craft and how he could be so sure of the size. Borland said he thought it was a weather balloon at first. Then as he walked along a path, he knew the area well. He said it was 1 to 2 stories thick. He could see the top of it. The edges were 90 degrees. A few folks have commented on that about, well, 90 degrees in a triangle wouldn't work. That would be a square. But I think he was just talking about the angular nature of the corner of the craft, there being no rounded edges, basically, I think.
Sure. And that's a very human thing as well, right?
Yeah.
Like in the moment, I wouldn't be like, they're 46.7 degrees. Like, I'm just roughly
Mate, it's the
giving you an
same.
impression.
It's totally the same though when you go, do you know what? I've done a 360 on this. What you mean is you've done a 180 because a 360 puts you, but everyone almost to a man says that I've done a 360 on it. You mean a
Yeah,
180?
sure.
That's so just those
Yeah.
kind of little turns of phrases. But because he describes there's one light on each corner, one big light in the center. He talked about the phone interference. We talked about the body of the craft, the skin. He said he could feel like a static all over his body,
Oh
and he
yeah,
could
he said like
smell.
a lightning storm, right? Like
Yeah,
it smelled like a
like
lightning storm.
like a static in the air and a
That's
smell
really
like it was
interesting.
a summery storm.
So when we were in Colombia and we were filming The Light on the Mountain, all day Vinny was saying like he felt like a charge in the air, that it was like lightning storm kind of smell and stuff like that. And then that happened. So I wonder if that kind of thing is a environmental kind of byproduct of whatever propulsion they're using. I'm guessing, I'm speculating, I'm an
Or
idiot,
the wine.
but yeah,
Or the
it's
wine.
curious. Yeah.
Um, Borland says Grush was really important in bringing him forward. He feels he's following in his footsteps. That was nice. Luna asked Borland about Kirkpatrick, Sean Kirkpatrick, and his staff's behaviour. And I think really fairly, Dylan Borland said that he went to the Arrow staff in 2023 in March. He feels they were good people just doing what they were told to do. I believe
Sure.
he said Kirkpatrick wasn't present. Either he didn't want to be there or just wasn't there for him speaking. He came back to this a few times about he knows information now he can't discuss, and that was something there was a nervousness to him, which I think was
Mhm.
probably endearing for a lot of folks like myself. Similar to Matthew Brown, a lot of folks commented over the Munstand as we did. There was a kind of genuineness to his approach, and he seemed a little awkward and a bit nervous. And I've got to be careful what I'm saying. And he was quite. I thought he was quite confident, and I think the Congress folks could have taken it the wrong way. But a few times he was like, "I don't know if you're even allowed to know that," and that could be like a bit
Yeah.
of an ego hit. But he was trying to make the point that I'm not sure, and I'll get into big trouble. At one point, referencing um, it would be what's the word? Treason. If he said
Reason. Yep.
something wrong, which was then the death penalty, still technically, and he's like, it's just not worth. So he was really trying his best to talk around what he could. And she asked him about how important the UAP Disclosure Act could be, and he says very. That's what I had from notes from Luna and Borland. Then
Yeah, I just at the end, the UAPDA thing, he said that he thinks the 7-year window of release should be shortened, which
yes,
I'm all for. We get the stuff sooner. But you can really tell that he's frustrated with the lack of transparency, with how he was treated. And I like that he didn't just say, ask me in a skiff. He explained, I think, more so to people at home watching, why he was saying that he doesn't know if he can say it, he doesn't know if they're allowed to hear it. There are multiple aspects to that. He can't just go in a room and spill the beans, or he could be put on death row.
yeah, and perhaps do you know what? This isn't a dig at previous people speaking at hearings, but perhaps the way they've come across about I can't tell you that here. We'll have to do it in a skiff. Can come across a little bit. I don't know if arrogant's the word or flippant, but they're just trying to make the point. But you're right, Dylan Borland kind of spelled it out for folks who are watching this maybe for the first time to be like, I don't know if you're even legally allowed to hear this. I would have to do it in a different way. And that was something they seemed really, really comfortable with. So yeah, Jared Moskowitz came in next, who's been good on this topic. He said for him the landscape of the conversation has changed and the quality of the witnesses stand out. He turns first to Wiggins and asks, what are your thoughts on what you saw? Wiggins says everything he was told as a kid and adult was no longer applicable as the objects he saw defied gravity. He didn't know what to think at the time, and he gets pressed on what he thinks now. And he says, "Look, I'm not an expert." Um, but he wasn't pressured by anyone to say what he thought it was or wasn't at any time. So again, it wasn't like he was making you have to make Arrow sound bad, you have to make Gatekeepers sound bad here. Where it was very fair, and I would rather, and this is something we're going to come back to with things later on. I would rather folks were just honest and said they don't know or they're not sure than put on a show,
Yeah,
which I thought Wiggins was
100%
really good
agree.
with.
And it's funny, we're all using like chatbots and things these days. And one of the problems with generative AI is it can't say I don't know. It will,
Mhm.
just give you the answer instead of saying that, because that's how it trains on certainties, right? And that's kind of, we're in the same place with the UAP thing. Like just say I don't know, please. It's okay. Like you can come back and fill in the gap later, or give more information in another way. But it's important to let people know that you don't think you know everything.
Yeah. He comments on the video from the USS Jackson, which is one of two videos shown here today, and it is not the controversial one. He says the American people should think there is something out there, and we should know as the people what it is. Moskowitz really seems to want him to commit to what it might be, but Wiggins just isn't going there, which is fair. Moskowitz turns to
Yeah.
Borland and asks him what he done after the event. Borland says he spoke to some co-workers. One said that he's best not speaking about it to anyone, kind of highlighting that reporting chain of command, what they do afterwards. And I think sometimes we can get so caught up in the event that you forget these people then after the event, what happens? They go home, they go for a shower, they go for something to eat, they've got to go on a school run the next morning, they've got to go back to work, got to go to a grocery store, any number of things, but with this now in their head. It's not as if their whole life changes and after that they sit waiting on podcasters phoning them to do interviews. That's not what happens. So their lives do go on outside of it, and he's got to kind of carry that with him. He asks Jeff Nusatelli the same. He said he called the Security Forces Command Centre to report it. I did like that he joked he did make sure that no one had been abducted
Yeah,
before. So
endearing. Everyone
yeah,
got a little giggle. It's a tense day, right? So make a joke. It's fine. You can have
yeah,
fun with this.
I'm all good with that. Anything to add there before I get to Mace?
Just to emphasize something that Moskowitz said when he was talking to Wiggins, when they were he was trying to get Wiggins to commit to what it was. And they basically came down to, okay, so it's either government or it's someone else that has this capability that is huge. That's a scary question, really. And it's been asked, this is what's called the threat narrative. But it's a question that needs to be asked, because if one of these things decided, as we hear later in the Russian cases from George, if these things decided that they wanted to turn around and be a problem, we'd have a big problem.
Yep. Representative Nancy Mace comes in. It's funny because of the setting and the cameras. It's You don't really know who's all there at any one time, and as we've seen at previous hearings, the congressmen and women come in and out as they have things on and they have to be places. Some folks can come in quite late and not see what's been happening. Others ask their questions, then go. So it's kind of like you don't know they're there and bang, they pop up in the seat. So Nancy Mace is there. She asks Borland if there were other witnesses. He says no, it was late, it was just him. She asks him if he thinks it was US government technology. Really interesting answer here, Dan. He says he once did think that, but would answer that now in a skiff because of what he knows now.
Yeah,
He didn't think it was a
hell of a
foreign
quote.
government. I'll just add that and then get your thought. Yeah, so he didn't think it was a foreign government, no.
Yeah, that's right. So it stands to be someone else. And does he mean, aliens from space? Or does he mean a group here that is outside the remit of the government? Or are we talking about, the Knights of Malta or the Templars or, something like that? I think it's clear at this point that this is like an extracurricular government thing that has broken off and is no longer reporting to the command structures that they should be. It's all gotten a bit out of hand. But also, I want to emphasize when I say that some of the people that work in these programs are just doing their job. And I love that keeps being emphasized. They're just putting food on the table for their kids and things like that and doing what they're told to do.
Yeah.
So we need a little compassion in that kind of way to get these people out and draw them out.
Borland said he needs to be careful as the wrong word could be treason. I've put espionage, but I think treason would be the right word. Espionage is very Metal Gear Solid. That would that would include Borland.
Funny you say that. When I said about Grush being in his Grizzle Batman phase, I was going to say Metal Gear Solid 3 Solid Snake phase, but not many people would know that, but you would have.
Metal Gear Grush.
Metal Gear
Solid
Grush.
Yeah. So that's the death penalty. He doesn't fear being trapped. And I felt for him here, okay. And I thought this was a real. Do you know? Actually, just going back through this with you, Dan, which is good about these. I feel better again about the hearings and forgetting because of something we've still to get to, which has put a bit of a dampener on it in a way. But again, you forget how good these were. He says he doesn't fear being tracked down by agencies. He's getting at, CIA, FBI, three-letter agencies, NSA coming after him and shooting him and all that kind of stuff. That's what he's getting at. But he's unemployed and he's living on unemployment benefits now, which run out in a few weeks, basically. it's the reprisals that have come from this that I would just urge people, and I don't think many folks listening to this or watching this are the type of folks that do partake in this behaviour, right? But if you're the type of person that sits there and goes, they should just tell us everything and to hell with NDAs and national security and tell us the bit they know. Here's a guy that's coming out and trying to say what he knows, which isn't the whole picture, I don't think, by any mean. And I imagine even Dylan Borland telling us everything he knows, it would be little more than really us going, that's really interesting. I wonder where he's got that from. But for him, he's in jail and he has no career. And we go, oh, that was a cool quote, wasn't it? And move on. And that's, I think, what gets lost.
You put that really succinctly. I think that's so true. You know, what are you risking and for who? Like, are you going to risk your life for someone that calls you a dickhead online because you didn't say the whole sentence that you went to say and thought, oh, wait, I'll be thrown in jail for that? Like, this is the part of, you know, you have to look at reality and how these people are being affected and how they could be affected if they carry on doing what they're doing, or just speak openly and freely in a public hearing. You know, the human, we have to see them as human and let them have a life as well and support them where we can. One thing I missed, a second ago, is when Borland said, I know what I know now, it wasn't us. He also says Arrow has that answer. So this is someone as well that sat there going, you're asking me these questions. I will be thrown in jail if I say this. You've got a government organization that knows the answer to this and they're not telling you. Go knock their door. Go subpoena them. Let that guy risk his career to be put in jail.
There was a really good point made by one of the folks in the Discord here. And remember, if you pay for the podcast, folks, you get access to the Discord. Rain Kitten said, why isn't the UAP Disclosure Fund not helping Dylan Borland? So that's a really fair question. You've got this disclosure fund set up to help whistleblowers, and here's one saying that he's on benefits and, you know, has no job. We don't know Dylan Borland's individual circumstance. We don't know that he hasn't been helped. I did ask folks at UAP Disclosure Fund if they were helping Dylan Borland or had made an offer, and they basically replied fairly to say they can't discuss individual circumstances due to, you know, privacy and such. So maybe Dylan Borland has reached out, maybe he hasn't, but I would like to think, if not, they have at least reached out to him. Because if you're an organisation going out to the public and asking for money to do with UFOs to help whistleblowers, to me, that looked like a whistleblower in need. And I don't mean full-on Pudsey Bear for those in the UK who are used to like children in need. You've got a guy there who potentially does need help financially and with work. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks involved in this topic that could help with that kind of thing as well. So it's not all book deals and documentaries for everyone that comes out and speaks.
I'm just going to throw into that because I think we need to consider it as well. You know, the disclosure funds, you know, UAP Disclosure Fund, we have, I've seen Michael Herrera selling coffee to raise money to help whistleblowers and stuff. And the one question I have, like, I totally agree with you, but how much money are these things making? Like, are they making enough? Because, you know, say Dylan, he's a really experienced guy, amazing achievements. And so his salary is probably pretty big. Do they have like $100,000 a year to give to a whistleblower? And how many of those can they support? You know? So again, there's that little reality piece in there, but I totally agree with the principle of what you're saying. Like, this is the person that group is meant to help.
Yeah, so there's all different questions for another day around that, Dan, but then around, so is it even a worthwhile organisation? I'm not attacking the UAP Disclosure Fund, but
Sure.
Any like that, it's like you're saying, Dan, well, I'm going to sell patches for Dylan Borland, and by the time I take off any costs and postage and I'm going to be able to give 50 cents to him, and I've sold 100, so I'm going to send him $50. Is that even worth doing?
Yeah,
Is
that,
that
that's not
maybe
what
he's like,
Dylan's work
things
about,
aren't that
about,
bad,
right?
mate, you know? So it's almost like there's a weighing up of the worthwhile of these, but that's perhaps where it's difficult for an organisation like UAP Disclosure Fund to be asking for donations when they can't really show you. If they could come out and said, Dylan Borland, we're reaching out to you, or Dylan Borland's in touch with us, I think they see an uptick in donations.
Yeah, sure. It's that transparency piece, isn't it, around these organizations? You know, it came up with Sol as well. You know, if you're raising money, just let us know what you're spending that money on. Like it'll go really far to endear you in the public eye and to get people to support you. And that's going to go really far to supporting whistleblowers.
Yeah. Nancy Mace says at the end that she's not got to the crash retrieval program stuff yet as she runs out of time, frustratingly. And I don't think we really got back to that, did we?
Not entirely, no, but she did
Not
make a
like
good point where she said if you don't know the program name, you can't get the info. And I think it's pertinent to just bring up because it's that weasel language again. You know, it's like me calling your house, your wife answers, and me saying, "Is Andy there?" And she says no because she knows you as Andrew.
yeah.
Um, we've got to do something about this, you know.
That's
And
not what
I
she
think
called me, but yeah,
ultimately, yeah, she's like you say Andy, right, or honey, or something like that. I don't know what your pet names are
a
for
lot
each
worse,
other.
a lot worse than that. But you're right, yeah. And that language piece, Dan, I don't even know if you want to mention it now. I can't remember exactly where it comes up, but the idea, and we've talked about this before. This isn't new or exclusive or anything, or we're geniuses for thinking it up. We didn't. But the idea that language is being used just to get around, we've got no conclusive proof of NHI, or we've no conclusive proof of alien. And it's like, well, yeah, but we've got they know, for example, they being Arrow, that this isn't human, but they don't maybe know exactly where it's from. But they're not coming out and saying that because they're answering the question to say, yeah, we've no proof that it's alien, we've no proof that it's ET. Actually, we don't know what it is, but they're not xenomorphs, so we're not calling them aliens. That
Yeah,
kind of obfuscation's being used, and I don't think that should be a shock to anyone.
yeah, for sure. And I think that's why you can see these language changes going. You know, UFOs associated with aliens, so now they start using UAP, and ET, you know, is what it is. So now they're starting to broaden the net and just say NHI, you know, anything not human as we know it. And I think that's the goal of the UAPDA and things like that, to broaden that language. You know, technologies of unknown origin. That's really neutral, kind of toothless. But you know, it doesn't say where they're from. It just says we don't know where they're from, and it's not us.
Yeah. Crockett comes in, Jasmine Crockett. They're all representatives or congressmen or women here, folks. I've just got notes to do with surnames and things, so doing our best. It's not a slight on your favourite congressman or woman if we misname them or mistitle them. There's a
I
lot.
think you should just give them random titles. You know, Dr. Burchett, Sir Crockett, or Madam
Crockett,
Crockett, I guess.
Crockett, I think wrestling because of Jim. Yeah, I'm not going to
Oh
go into
yeah,
it.
yeah, sure, nice, yeah.
Yeah. So she asks Spielberger. So we get Joe Spielberger sounds like Timu Spielberg, doesn't it?
It really
So it's
does,
like,
yeah.
yeah. I showed Susan that message the night before the hearing to say, "Oh, there's another witness coming tomorrow, and I'm going to bed. I've not got time to look at it, but I'll deal with it in the morning." And she was like, "Spielberger, is that even a real name?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's a little bit made up sounding, but yeah." It's like I've got this witness, but we can't use his real name. What should we call him? Joe Spielberger. Yep, and they've went with that. Um,
Imagine it
so
was Spielberg, and it was just
yeah,
a fake
yeah.
name, you know.
I've got like my notes are a bit shit here. Sorry, folks, because I think I was messaging something from the Disclosure Fund at this point. But she talks about overclassification. Um, Spielberger mentioned rather timely the 9/11 Commission report on how overclassification tried to cover up what could have been done to stop the attacks on that day. Let's not go
It
into
was
why
it
Trade
was
Center 7
also
collapsed, but different day.
though yeah, but it was also because the different departments had different bits of information. The complete picture would have told them exactly what was going to happen and when and how to stop it, and they weren't talking to each other. So that overclassification prevented them from doing anything about it as well.
And if you're listening to this, folks, on 9/11, because it's coming out pretty much that day, very sorry if
Oh,
you
yeah,
lost
that's
anyone
weird.
on that day. 24
Yeah,
year anniversary, and all that stuff. So yeah, not particularly nice. Very poignant for a lot of folks as well. Um, so that the conversation here, Dan, I think you were quite right earlier. Spielberger does a really good job. It's not the NHI route here. We're talking policy. We're talking overclassification, whistleblower protections. It's not sexy, but it's probably really important. I likened this to the Man United midfield that had Ji Sung Park and Darren Fletcher in it, where they done a lot of really dirty work that wasn't appreciated till they weren't there. But they did allow Rooney, Ronaldo, and Tevez up front to do all the glamorous stuff that got the goals. And
As
yeah,
an as a non-football follower, that was almost complete gibberish to me. I recognized a few names. Rooney, I know him.
yeah, there was people in the midfield that weren't particularly glamorous, but they were
Okay,
really important to the engine of the overall machine. Because if they didn't do those jobs, the ones up front that got all the headlines wouldn't have been able to do what they done.
sure.
So it was important to bring this back a little bit. She applauded how much good there was and how it was like actually governing in the hearing. Sorry, she talked about the hearing being like actual governing. It came across refreshing that they're getting to do their jobs without bickering or squabbling or red versus blue and all that kind of stuff that goes on across all political spectrums. It was like we're getting to do our job here, and it's a good thing. Um, so yeah, even though that was a little political dig, I thought it was a nice point because she was making it in a good way for me. Um, I just want to pull her up though. She said to the witnesses, "I do want to thank you all for all of your stories. Don't call them stories."
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sharing your testimony. Like, I get
Yep.
it, just clumsy language, but yeah, I hear it.
Experiences, whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Tim Burchett comes in.
He was
God
great
bless him.
today. I mean, I have a lot to say about his politics and stuff. I'm not going to go into it because that's not what we're talking about here today. But I think Burchett had a really good showing today.
I really like Tim Burchett. I don't go into the politics stuff regardless, but I feel almost sorry for Tim at times because even when I last spoke to him on interview, he was a little bit dejected. I think at trying to get stuff done and being stonewalled, and he talked about how even at his level of he was quite self-deprecating here as well. Where I think he was like, oh, number one on the list, but number one in your heart, but number 437th on the list. He kind of jokes about his position. Um, I liked how he said, I see some friends in the audience, but I also see some enemies. I've got my eye on you.
Yes.
So,
Who? Like, I wish
one,
he'd have pointed at them and just said, these guys are keeping tabs on us and stopping us doing
so
XYZ.
one of the listeners was there and messaging me during the event, and he said he seemed to look over at the press pack.
Oh,
So I
okay.
think it was. He said they all laughed as well, though. So I think there was a little bit of a
Okay.
yeah. So he starts with Knapp, and who says, the money's going out of government and into contractors, which makes it harder to find. He asks Knapp about working with the Russians. Gets very James Bond this now. Knapp mentions being able to get information out of Russia. I love the fact when they ask him how he managed it. He talked about he noticed the Russians when they were classifying piles of documents, they only stamped the top document. So he just removed the classified page and carried the rest out because they weren't stamped. Mwah.
Yep. Very
Fucking
human
superb.
error, right? Like
Yeah,
someone uploading something to FOIA that they shouldn't have or something like that. It's like, yeah,
yeah,
they're just people in these positions and they make these mistakes. And sometimes they
100%.
work to our benefit. And the Calvin UFO, exactly that. The system allowed a copy to be made and kept, and then we found it 30 years later.
Yeah. Humans top to bottom in this, folks. And regardless, that's the thing for me. Even at the murkiest depths of this, where I'm guessing there are some really scary people that make some really horrible, scary decisions in this. And I mean the real few that truly know what's going on or deal with this at any level. Like they're still human beings and will still be prone to human error, judgment, mistakes, no matter how, Terminator they may come across or behave in what they do. Knapp talked about an incident in Russia where a UFO entered launch codes close to World War III at that point. Burchett runs out of time, but he says, who has the information? Knapp says contractors like Lockheed and the usual suspects. Not the first time Knapp would name names here, but yeah, Knapp was quite happy to, and I think that's probably the beauty of bringing in a George Knapp, where he's not bound by NDAs and security clearances, and loyalties to a department. It's just what he knows and what he's gathered over the years. And sure, that's Dan got its downside as well to, well, he could have been investigating 30 years of hearsay, not the band, but, he could have been investigating a lot of nonsense, but I don't think so. I think there was a lot of good stuff came from it.
I'm sure he got given nonsense and he didn't publish it. Like
Mm,
we don't see that side of things. People just assume that George publishes everything that he's given, and that's not true. We already have seen that he didn't report the story of the video that we were shown during this hearing, or one of the videos we were shown during this hearing.
yeah.
So yeah,
With
he keeps
2017,
things close to his chest. Yep.
and it's worth reminding folks, Knapp had the story before Kane Blumenthal and Cooper for OSAP and stuff in 2017, and you know, I'm sure there's a whole big story around it, but he could have published that first and didn't. So, you know, there is that element to it as well.
Yeah.
Knapp doesn't go about telling everyone that every single interview that I could have done the 2017 article because Knapp knew himself. There's a greater good here. There's a bigger reach.
Yeah.
So
Who
yeah.
is he? Stephen Greer. Like, that's exactly the
Hey.
kind of thing that Greer would do.
Ah,
Knapp also
Dr.
mentioned that
Greer, have
Dr.
some
Greer.
respect.
Yeah,
You
sorry.
know
And
that
just to
better
be
than
clear,
anyone.
have I said it here before that when Kurt and I interviewed him, he demanded to be taught Dr. Greer? Just going to put that comment in context for people that haven't heard that. Yeah, George Lockheed here. Great that he's naming names. This is what everyone wanted, right? But again, he emphasizes that the people at Lockheed are lying because they were told to. They are doing their jobs. They have mortgages. They have families to look after, so they don't want to rock the boat. And I always think of that as well when people say, "Where are the janitors from these UFO programs? You know, the cleaners, all those people. They're being looked after, really cushy, and probably they use cheap labor as well. So these people equally don't want to blow the lid on it for that reason." But I also want to tell people to watch a movie called The Man Who Saved the World. It is on YouTube, and it does cover a different incident where ICBMs in Russia were activated and they had to make this decision. And it's all about the man who made the decision, why he made it. And you get a good sense of the feeling in the room when these alerts go off and the ICBMs come online, what the hell you've got to do. Harrowing documentary. Highly recommend you watch it. Very relevant.
So, yes, Lauren Boebert comes in, everyone's favourite. I just didn't think in the last one she'd had a particularly good showing. But Dan,
Did
you
you mention
felt she was better
hybrids?
in this one?
Yeah, like she didn't mention hybrids. She was a lot more down to earth. There was one comment she made asking about how we get past the Van Allen belt, the radiation belt in space, which is part of the moon landing conspiracy. But she didn't make that obvious, so it just sounded like an innocuous question to anyone that doesn't know. So she was, much more on task today, and I think in line with the people around her.
She asked Wiggins if any transmedium object can disappear without a sound that he knows of. He said no. They cleared up the reporting around the event a little bit. She asks Jeff about the reporting. He talks about records being destroyed, not just about UFOs, but in general, and that's a larger issue that's worth being addressed here. She asks DB, Christ, who am I forgetting? DB, Dylan
Borland,
Borland. I've put DB, and I'm like, for fuck's sake.
the rock star,
Yeah, he asked
DB
DB
Cooper.
about being a geospatial intel officer, and he has seen UFOs. And has he seen UFOs operating over US airspace? I think she's getting at, with satellite imagery and stuff like that. He says he hasn't, unfortunately. And she asks J.S. Spielberger about whistleblowers having appeals processes to counter retaliations. And he talked about, like I mentioned earlier, the bottom line is they are forced to rely on protections from the same agencies who are retaliating against them. Brutal.
Yep.
Dan, I'm coming to you to report an issue about you to you and what you're going to do with it to help me deal with it. You're like, absolutely fuck all. I'll be doing nothing.
Yeah, right. HR is
That's
there to
what I'm
protect the
having to do.
company, not to
Yeah.
help the employees. And this is what we'll see. And now it was also interesting that Dylan said that his report to the IC Inspector General was made credible, not urgent, which is different to Grush's, where we heard it was deemed credible and urgent. And a number of
Hmm.
people around that time tried to say, well, credible and urgent is just, it's a standard of evidence that he's put forward. It's nothing to do with the UAP thing. But now we're seeing this different designation for another person that's kind of saying things that, it's pretty big what Dylan said today. So I don't understand this distinction between the two things. If it's just a standard paperwork thing that they do, that's really a little confusing. Might just be something I don't know, but also a little sus. The records being destroyed are a no-no, and I just want to tell people to support places like the UAP archives with David Marler, and other archives around the world, because that's exactly their job, is to go, oh, I know these are being destroyed in 3 years. Let's get everything we can, and we'll keep them so the federal government doesn't, just throw them in the trash or shred them because there's nothing important here. And sometimes it's really innocuous. People just cleaning out closet spaces, and the video is just, a speck of light, and it doesn't really give you much information, so they throw it away. But that is data, and we do need that data because it tells us where these things show up, when they're showing up, what's near. There's a lot you can extrapolate from that kind of information.
Yeah, I've got Marler on David Marler on Sunday. Nice to speak to him.
Cool.
It's been a while. Um, Representative Eric Burlison comes in, who has probably taken over the mantle for the UFO topic, I think, politically, and kind of ran with it, hasn't he? Between him and Luna, but Burleson seems a lot more boots on the ground in terms of going to visit the mummies and stuff, and he's getting into the weeds of the topic a little bit. So yeah, it's like introducing the topic to your mate, and within a year, he has gone to like the Roswell conference and Awakening in the UK, and off to the Sol Foundation, and he's over to San Marino, and sponsoring the Galileo project all in the space of a year. And you're like, Christ, you have gone into this in a big way.
Yeah.
Burleson's kind of done that all the while being a congressman. So fair play to him. He says he's really come round to this phenomena. He's open to the ideas of aliens, but not totally in on it. I just want to add there, Dan. Afterwards, he was on a show called Washington Watch with Tony Perkins, and he does actually say on that, I don't think this phenomenon is alien. It's likely something else, but as he's talking, the guy kind of cuts him off and moves him on. Not deliberately, but more of a we're running out of time for this segment. Can you hurry up, kind of thing. So that is something that while he's big on this, he is quite keen to say maybe that's a protection thing. Maybe that is like a maybe he knows and he's just like, look, it's not alien. It's something else, but and it just keeps him at a safe distance from the conversation while being able to get involved. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I think so. He wants to take in everything he can before he makes a decision. And I can respect that. Think what you want about the mummies in South America. The best way to understand something is to go and experience it, right? And he's really doing that. And yeah, great. He's doing a really good job. It was interesting that he said that the UAPDA wasn't put into the NDAA in the House because it was deemed like non-germane, which is just not relevant. Relevant to what? Like, how is it not relevant to defense? It's really weird. It seems like, Mike Turner has left the building, but we're still having issues putting this legislation in for whatever reason.
Right. The video, Dan. So
The
we got
video.
our second video. We were actually told there was going to be three videos.
We were, yeah.
One was new, but we ended up just seeing two, of which this was the new one. The USS Jackson one had been shown on Weaponized, I believe, and perhaps other platforms.
And before we get into this one, I just
Yes.
want to point out that when Chief Wiggins was talking about that video, he said that the operator of the Sapphire system had to slew the camera into the craft. So when I'm watching the video that Wiggins brought and I'm seeing the erratic movements of the object, without more context and more data, we can't see whether it's the object moving or whether it's the camera moving. It's just another example of how, half transparency in some ways is almost worse than full transparency,
Yeah.
or worse than hiding, I should say.
Right. How to go into this? Because if you're not online, folks, this has ended up being quite a volatile element of the conversation. I think what I'll do, Dan, is I was thinking of putting it here, but we'll just keep talking. And at the end of the show, I'm going to clip on the end. There's a 25-minute interview with one of the listeners from the Discord chat, who is ex-British military ammunitions expert. And he really kindly, but anonymously, has come on to explain what he thinks is happening in the video from his
And it's great.
background and expertise. Really good. Dan, you saw his explanations in the Discord, and I'm not telling anyone what to think. We're just going to share our opinion here, and you can hear that at the end, folks. So even if you think Dan and Andy are talking shit now, do listen to that 25 minutes at the end, because he also shares a UFO experience he had just last year, which is really interesting to try and give you the idea that, look, I'm not just debunking this topic. Here's what I think of the video, but separately, here's something really weird that happened to me and why I'm now into this so much. But
Yeah.
separately, so what happens is Burleson introduces a video, and how he introduces it, which is important. He says, I want to queue up a video I've been given. He gives details of the video, telling us that it's of an MQ-9 drone tracking an orb or another object. That's what he says. It's an orb or an object off the coast of Yemen in 2024, Dan, was it? Yeah, 2024.
Yeah.
Um, and he mentions that you're going to see another drone which isn't on camera. So you've got the drone from above. Imagine the go is it the go fast video?
Yeah.
Yeah, the go fast video where you've got that shot from above, object in the middle of the camera, water underneath, flare infrared, um, black and white look,
Blurry,
blurry. Yeah,
grainy.
yes, but we'll get into it. So he mentions you're going to see a missile being fired by um, the other side of things. Sorry, 2 seconds. Don't even know how that happens. You're going to see a missile being fired by the other side of the screen, and he says, "I'll let you see what happens next." Okay. What happens, and I'm going to put the video on screen at this point, is the missile hits the object that we've been told is an orb or an object. At first glance, Dan, I'm going to give you my reaction. The object gets hit. It looks like the object takes the hit. Some bits break off, but it keeps on going. The camera cuts away to Burlison. That's a technical issue. Then cuts back, and we've got a different view. So that was a little technical hitch in the arena, in the hall. Sorry. And then we've got a wider view of the object kind of tumbling away but carrying on. So what we're made to believe here, or just from watching it, what I looked at was, shit, that missile has hit that object, bounced off it, potentially done a little bit of damage, but it's carried on flying. That's pretty incredible. So, Dan, can you just tell me what you thought when you first saw it?
I was astonished. That was my immediate reaction, and it mirrored. I don't know if people have watched the News Nation segment with Ross, where he is watching the video and he has a host with him, his producer, and the producer is really good at her job, but she's not really into the subject. I think it's clear. This moment, they were both on screen. Ross said, "Oh, that's new." Her face is a picture. It changes from just like, smile, happy-go-lucky, having a conversation, to brows furrowed, and she just says, "Oh God." And I think that says everything about this video, right? That free of context, that was the reaction that it was designed and intended to give. Would that be fair?
Yes. Can I tell you at the end of my note? I'll read my exact note I wrote as I watched it, Dan. Burleson shows video of MQ-9 drone tracking an orb off the coast of Yemen. Another drone launches a missile. We see in the video the Hellfire missile hits the orb, but it spins a bit, then carries on. Wow, 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 wow. So that was my initial reaction.
It's a good
right?
dog impression.
In the Discord, thanks. In the Discord chat, even the really skeptical folks, were kind of blown away by it. And we all went, shit, have we just got a really good video from a hearing? Like, that's surprising. And it was just, it went online really quickly. Everyone was sharing it and pictures and stuff like that. However,
And
did we bring it up here? Yeah? What do you think?
yeah,
I'll let you
go for it.
Okay.
I was
cool.
just gonna say that this video is what has been focused on. Like, if you go online and you search UFO hearings, it's this video. So
Yes.
it's getting out there, and this is the shiny stuff that people want to see, and they've grabbed it and propagated it. The great statements from Borland and stuff like that, they're all being left to the wayside. It's all about this video.
Yeah. So, in the Discord chat after it, folks, I wasn't really looking at too much of the online commentary because I was trying to be in the Discord but also watch the hearing. One of the listeners, like I say, at the end will go into great detail. It's 25 minutes long, and I really appreciate that, on why they believe, if you actually watch it, and I'm not telling you, for the love of Christ, the shit I've had today off of people online. It's fine. It is what it is. It's just the online. It happens in any. I'm a football fan, Dan. I've told that enough on here. It happens when you share an opinion on a football. Yeah. It happens when you share an opinion on a fucking football player or something, right? As well, people get really heated, and he's explained basically this is more than likely. He thinks 99.9% a stationary object. He talks about the parallax effect, where we're looking at the movement comes from the drone in the air moving, not the object. The object will be barely moving, if at all. The missile, if you really look up close to it as well, Dan, I don't think this is being unfair, and this is something people posted online quite quick. The missile doesn't hit off it and seem to deflect, it goes through it. And then you see what it looks like, and this came up quite quickly, 3 orbs coming off of the object and then following it. Or it's debris coming off of the balloon. And bear in mind, folks, we're not talking about a party balloon here. I imagine it's a kind of rigid material or semi-rigid material.
It's huge as well.
Yeah, it would be big. But we don't know any of this, and that's something we'll come back to. So the 3 bits that come off it, you could say, and people online are certainly doing this, you could say it then follows the object, or if indeed the object is stationary and the missile has passed through it, then it's just bits of material floating next to it in midair. You only see that for a couple of seconds at most before the camera changes and you don't see it again. So there's a hell of a lot of assuming going on all parties here, okay? However, the missile as well, people are saying this Hellfire missile, and this is what attracted the listener to come and comment on it, because he's like, I don't want to be a debunker. However, I know Hellfire missiles. He mentioned 2 types, and he went, one of them does explode. So either it was one of the explosive missiles, and because the object was so light, when it got to it, it's punctured through and not blown up because there's not enough impact on the missile to register that it's hit something. Or you can see pictures online of the same missile that has no warhead as such or explosive device built into it, and it's got blades as part of it, and it would just shred through the balloon and cause bits of it to come off.
And
So
those blades they come out the middle. Like if you imagine,
yes,
the long cylinder of the missile, they come out of the middle.
like a dog
so
chain,
that,
one of those dog chains for pit bulls and the comically big ones from a cartoon.
Yeah, but they're huge. This missile is going to be like this thick, so these things are going to be really long.
Big
So
Bertha
they're going to
and the Bob
slice things up. I've seen them used.
Mario movie.
Nice. I've seen them used in the Middle East in the wars out there. You can see pictures of what it does to like cars. They'll use them to target an object when they don't want the explosion. So if they only want to kill one person in a car, they'll fire at the driver's seat. And it only takes out that one person. To be clear, it damages the rest of the car on the ground immeasurably, and there's definitely other injuries to the people around. But if you're firing one of these things in the sky at something, there's not going to be a lot of collateral damage. You're going to shred whatever you come across, and there's not going to be an explosion. And to speak to this person's point as well about the things that come off the object, when I first saw those, it looks like they're following, right? But you correctly said we see them for a couple of seconds. If they did happen to fall, they're this light material, they're not going to be falling for, a good 30, 40 seconds. You're not going to notice the decrease in size as they get to the floor. So the parallax here could cause a trick with the movement and the way that those are kind of floating down and not doing so quickly. It could be just one of these videos that is a training exercise edited to look strange to someone that is unfamiliar. So I'm really glad that guy came forward and that he's going to be on here chatting about it.
Yeah, and listen, we don't know. You have to make up your own mind. And I've seen a lot of folks online really pushing the video and sensationalizing it. And I think the message from some folks after has changed. I saw afterwards Manik von Rennenkamp and Lou Elizondo both on News Nation. And to be fair, they largely pushed the idea that we shouldn't let any video, regardless of what it shows, take away from the content of the hearing and what's being said and what's being trying to achieve. And they do say, and I think it might have been Elizondo, not Rennenkamp, who mentions we have had videos like this presented before, which have been debunked or misidentified or later analysed properly, and we find it's something else. So that's refreshing, because I think we have to take a step back here, and there's a lot of emotion in the room because people feel they're being attacked when they're told this is probably something else. I would love this to be a UFO, Dan. I don't think it is, from if you really break down. But I'm no expert in FLIR. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a physics guy. I don't know what I'm looking at. Maybe it is.
Oh, we're qualified. They call podcasters when they want this image analyzed, right? That's what they do.
Yeah, maybe it's an NHI craft orb and it's hit, and these 3 bits follow along behind it for a brief second before it cuts off. Or maybe it's a balloon in a training exercise when a missile's gone through it. Someone was really unhappy with me online, Dan, because they had asked yesterday, and I probably spent too much time and energy online replying to people, why would the US waste so much money firing a missile at a balloon? And I posted the picture of the Chinese spy balloon being blown up.
I was just gonna say, yeah,
They
exactly.
didn't like my attitude, and I was like, I'm just saying it's been done, but yeah. So I think when the
They,
emotion dies down, folks, and that's really the point I was trying to make. I think I'd love to see some analysts get on a podcast and discuss it side by side, like adults, and go, here's why I think this, and have them both go, no, if you look at this. The issue, though, Dan, to skip to after the hearings, it was only after the hearings on interviews, I believe News Nation, Burlison confirmed there was no chain of custody for the video. It was dead dropped to him the day before, sorry. The day of the hearing, the day before the hearing. He had no idea who it was from, completely anonymous, and he had no time to check it or analyze it or vet it. So he basically admitted I had to just put it in. For me, don't put it in, or you have to give that context before you show it.
yeah,
It was,
I mean,
again, just sort of one more thing.
sure.
What really frustrates me now, and there's a pattern of this, and this goes across multiple different shows, podcasts, blogs, newspapers, TV shows, hearings, whatever. People are really quick to put stuff out and claim it's one thing, but very quickly, really quickly, a couple of folks online can say it's another. Sometimes they can, and that's the good stuff or the anomalous stuff, and that's the ones you go, oh, so that's really worth investigating. But if you're a UFO person, which I'm going to go out on a limb, Dan, and say you and I both are, you can't
I think so.
criticize debunkers who just want to debunk everything if you're going to take every single video at face value and say it's a UFO,
Yeah,
because it's
I
not.
completely agree with you. Like we need to be careful in how we're presenting these things because it's fine for things to be prosaic. Great. We get them out of the data pile and off the table. That's a positive thing. But when they're presented in a context that makes them appear to be anomalous, and you kind of lean into that, when it's at a UFO hearing as well, then people are going to have issues with it because they're going to get very excited about it and very passionate, and we all have our bias because we just do. We're trying to kind of get a balance between being informed and also saying, "Hey, I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you what I see."
Yeah.
The camera in itself does not work like the phone cameras we have. It's showing you
No.
different colors of different things. It's black and white. One thing doesn't mean what you think it means. And so for casual observers, i.e. me and you, or someone passing it by on TikTok or
Yeah.
Threads or X or whatever, they don't know. And we've got to be okay to say we don't know. Like, I'm leaning this way, but I truly don't know. Scale of 1 to 10,
Yeah.
6. I'm convinced it's strange, but I truly don't know. That's okay, and we need that more because this isn't the first time this has happened. Like you said, and I'm just going to speak to one idea that I've seen out there, and I want to hear how legitimate you think the idea is, because I'm like, maybe I don't know. Yeah, see, I'm using those words.
Mhm.
Being dead dropped a picture or a video before an event where someone is no doubt excited to show people new things and to say things. This isn't the first time it's happened. And I saw someone online point out, like, this is an active attempt to discredit people who are at the front of the movement. What do you think about that idea that someone gave, Elizondo that crop circle picture, or the crop irrigation picture, I should say, not crop circle, and also gave Burlison this video because they knew they were excited and that they would go and show it in this forum, and that when it's shown as prosaic, the credibility's gone.
Okay, maybe. It's one thing, and I've seen podcasters do it, right? Let's use us, low level pond scum, where they've jumped in with a guest or a video or a picture for clicks and views without any real checking, or they've stuck the word bombshell in a thumbnail, okay? That kind
Oh
of
God.
stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. But if you are at senior level and you're congressman or woman, intel officer, whatever it might be, you need to do better. It's not, because these hearings were really good, Dan, and we're still going through it now, right? And we are going back and forward over all the great stuff that was said. Every single clip I've watched of the hearings after has had that video running over and over and over again. That's what the public are going to see. And all it's now going to take, and you can get conspiratorial with it, like you've kind of done there. However, it's
Sure.
not an
Yep.
unfair point. It's not an unfair point. If that now gets confirmed to be a balloon, it shafts the whole. It undoes so much of the good work. I don't want anyone coming to me if it is and going, "Oh, you were right," and I'm not right. I'm just saying I think, in my opinion, based on speaking to some people. And let me just say, folks, I've spoken to enough decent UFO researchers in the last 24 hours who think the same, but maybe don't want to say it online just yet. But there's a lot of folk out there jumping on TV and saying otherwise. And if it was me, and I was asked to do this, face doesn't get on TV much for good reason, but if I was asked to do radio or a TV show or anything like that about the video, I'd be really fair and say it was really interesting at first glance. On a second glance, it looks like more work needs done because it could potentially be a little bit of parallax going on, a moving object, looking at a stationary target, all that kind of stuff. You have to be fair. Otherwise, long term, it just does damage to the subject. So you've got two options, or three options really. One, you jump in all guns blazing, and we either get proof of alien life, great, or we don't, and you look a fucking idiot, and just do damage to the topic selfishly, but for your own means and celebrity. Two, you take a more measured approach and you go, right, it could be something interesting, but we need to do more analysis, data, science, whatever you want to call it. And you go from there and you let the work come out. Or you just go, no, nothing's alien and you're a total debunker and everything's ridiculous. It just depends for me where you want to sit. I like to be the second one. I just think this time I moved a little bit quicker to go, no, I think it's a balloon. And plenty of folks did. And I had people, again, with big Twitter accounts, relatively speaking, messaging me yesterday why I thought that. And I just copied and pasted and went, this is what the guy in my Discord said. Here's his background. You don't have to believe it. But, and even they went, huh. And one of them's quite prominent online explaining stuff as UAP or UFOs. And even they went, yeah, do you know what? Rational. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally hear what you're saying, and I think it's correct. The message, the headline message of the hearing is we need to protect whistleblowers, but the headline coverage post hearing is look at this video of an alien, basically, right, of a genuine UFO, and so the rug gets pulled if it turns out to be prosaic. Where had Burlison in the setting said, "This is anonymously sent it to me. I don't know what it is." But it speaks to the fact that we can't get information on things like this and we can't solve them. So whether it's weird or it's not, or it's just an adversary attacking, the borders of our country, there's a potential national security issue here and a potential failure here as well, and people lose their lives. It's not about whether the video is alien or not. It's about whether the whistleblowers are protective enough to bring the information to people who can analyze it properly. And at the moment, they're not. And that message is kind of lost, and it will be, because it'll just be, oh, it was a balloon, they all got fooled again. And it's like, well, no, a lot of us didn't. We're just talking about the other stuff from the hearing that was more impressive than a grainy video.
In the coming weeks and months, Dan, I want people coming back at me going, ha, you idiot, you totally messed up on this one. Turns out it was truly anomalous. It was a great video. Here's all the reasons it wasn't a training balloon or test event or something like that. And I will be so happy. And like I say, it's very similar. And I talk about it so often, Dan, but my love for football. Right now, my football team has a manager that is failing badly. It's not going well. And everyone almost in the club wants him gone. But the owners are hanging on there and they think otherwise. They think it's going to work out. The support don't think so. I would love to be wrong. I would love at the end of the season my club to have won a load of trophies and, the manager and the owners to turn around and go, see, you guys didn't know what you were talking about. And I would love it as a supporter because we've been successful and got what we wanted. I just worry this is something that could do damage because, like you say, if I'm a gatekeeper, if I'm one of the shadowy cabal and I dead dropped, and mate, do you know what? Maybe it was somebody well known in UFO community that gave the video over and just never done the checking or vetting. But if I'm a gatekeeper or a secret keeper, Dan, I'm laughing just now.
Yeah.
I'm loving it because I'm going, oh, we got away with one here.
Job done, right?
And they're tearing themselves apart over it. So, like I say, I'll let the expert speak at the end, but please make up your own minds. And I would genuinely love to hear from folks, Dan, and if you can come back on pretty soon, because I think we'll leave the questions today because there's so many to get through, and we're not even
Oh,
finished
yeah,
the hearing
sure.
yet.
And it's been a while, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do like an AMA soon and catch
Yeah.
up with
We'll
listener
go through
questions.
everyone's questions, and maybe another few days we'll give some stuff off the back of it. But please listen to what we're just calling him S, just the letter S. Wants to stay anonymous at the end, has to say. And if you think otherwise, or if you know someone that could come on and speak, not someone who and I've seen some folks and they've got like Galactic Federation in their title telling me why I'm wrong about this. Right? I'm not wrong. I'm not right.
Starseeds.
I'm just sharing my opinion. That's
You're
it.
exploring is what you're doing. You're
Based
trying to
on
make your mind up based on the
yeah.
information that you have. And that's fine. And I hate when people attack each other for those kind of things. It's like, let them learn. Like that's
Yeah,
a great thing to happen. So yeah,
I
I
know.
totally agree.
I
People just
just
need to say, I don't know, let the chips fall where they may.
yeah, and go and buy a copy of Atlas of You. No, I'm not doing that. So Dan, next up, we had the shortest note I've got for the whole hearing. Ms. Lee comes in. Is it Summer Lee? Sorry, I've not got the full names. Um, Miss Lee comes in, who is yes, Summer Lee. Really poor. Used this as a political platform, spoke so quickly, was so panicked, nothing to add, not the time and place for it. That's all I've got to say on that one, Dan.
Yeah, I just we touched on this bit a little bit before the hearings, and I was just saying to Andy about how the environment and the atmosphere in the US right now. Everyone's on a knife edge, wondering what's going to happen. And I think that came through in Miss Lee's questions, which was a shame because everyone else was playing ball and being bipartisan, and they could have spent the whole time arguing really easily. But
Yeah,
that's not what this was. You know, Spielberger did great in response to her. You know, he said that they had 800 tips on the DoD giving service members extended wait times to get care they need from Iraq. And so he's essentially using this moment where she's trying to score political points to highlight the amount of whistleblowing that goes on. You know, it's not just one or two people every year, 800 on one thing. And it enabled them to highlight the abuse of that security process and to actually get them the help they needed. So yeah, Spielberger was wonderful. Miss Lee less so, but he did great.
yeah. Mr. Crane comes in. One of the comments in the chat was Fraser's let himself go, which I liked. Are you good for time at the minute, by the way?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking. My light behind me is coming down lower, and I don't know what's going on. But it's fine. I'm just going to look a little weird, like moving skin on a craft, right? Like lava.
It's not
It's
an
fine.
abduction, yeah, just in case folks are curious on the YouTube. So Crane asks if they were scared or hesitant to come forward because of their stories. He kind of gives a generalised sweeping statement. Won't lie, folks, at this point, my notes get a little bit more shaky because it was going on a while. I think at this point, Dan, some of the questioning gets a little bit either repetitive or less specialised. It does come back round a little bit more. So forgive me if my notes aren't all there. There's a variety of answers here based on that because largely because others have paved the way or they were given permission to speak. I think Wiggins says by the Navy, so he's grateful for that, and that's got to be acknowledged. At this point, I've got the note here. Yeah, at this point, I feel some of the folks coming in are covering a little bit of the same ground, and that's to be expected. Like I say, people coming in and out, they don't all meet before and share questions. I think to your point, Dan, if 2 or 3 congressmen or women could meet up, take all the questions in and ask them, they could maybe filter through some of them at that point. Use
Yeah, for
ChatGPT
sure.
and say, take out the repetitive stuff here.
It can
Um,
go badly though. To just to that point, when
mm,
Gillibrand and I forget the other representative's name, they both grilled John Kozlowski from Arrow and Kirkpatrick, and it was
yeah,
really toothless, and it didn't go anywhere. I feel like
yeah,
Luna Burlison, Burchett, they wouldn't be
yeah,
toothless, but it
yeah. I
can
get
go
it.
the other way as well. You know.
The only other note I've got from Crane, he says he wrote to the DoD and the Department of Defense in July 2025, so just 2 months ago, about the treatment of David Grush, and has yet had no reply. Luna immediately comes in and says we are going to be following that straight up. So yeah, excellent, wonderful.
Yeah,
Um,
that's an action piece there, isn't it? So we should
yep.
see something from Luna, following that up and seeing what their response is. So yeah, actionable. Love it. Great.
Anything else on Crane for you?
No, it was the latter for me. That was the highlight there.
Cool. Representative Gill, who is the guy who looks like Superman.
Oh, wait,
From a
sorry.
yeah,
I forgot. Knapp, I think, said something important to Mr. Crane. He said that he thinks that the secret keepers hid everything because they didn't want to panic the public way back when, and over time it's kind of grown into a bit of a monster where they're racing to be adversaries and also keep it secret. So yeah, that's Knapp's idea of why the cover up is happening. We always get the why question. There is.
yeah. And do you know what I felt generally through it? The witnesses, as expected, they're not public speakers. Answered the questions they were asked in various ways and to various degrees of success. I thought Knapp was really good at making the most of any questions he was asked and
Yeah,
managing to bring in stuff that he maybe wanted to get in there. And fair play to him, he wasn't mentioning, oh, on Weaponized, I done this, or it wasn't like self promotion. He was trying to get names, places, events, contractors, and get this stuff to the forefront so it's there. So I thought
yeah.
that was a good job.
And that probably comes directly from his work as a journalist, because he
Mm,
knows how to manage the response and get stuff in even if it's not asked about. It's the opposite of what politicians usually do. You'll ask them one thing and they'll kind of weasel their way around it. George is using this to his benefit here.
yeah. Representative Gill, like I say, dude who looks like Superman. He gives his time to Luna. Then Burlison, I've put, yeah. So Luna is given a minute's time. She asks Knapp how he got the files out of Russia, or how she knows the files. Sorry, how he knows the files from Russia weren't bullshit. He said he gave the documents to Robert Bigelow and James Lakatsky. He did mention someone else, I think, as well. I don't know if you've got that, Dan.
Glenn
He said,
Gaffney, he
"Oh, was that who he
mentions.
gave the documents to?"
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
And they
Maybe
checked.
it's definitely another name he mentioned, though.
I'm sure, or it was an organisation as well. And he says they checked over the documents, analysed them.
Oh, Bigelow and Bass. That's what he was saying there. He gave it to, yeah, Bigelow and Lakatsky and everyone had the files, the Russian files translated, so they could see whether they were bullshit or not. Basically,
And he said Grush. He said Grush vouched for their authenticity as well.
yes,
Um,
which is new information, right? Nothing
yes.
new comes from this stuff. Right there.
Burleson commands, yeah, commands. Burleson commands Chief Wiggins. Burleson commends Chief Wiggins on coming forward while serving. Really important, worth shouting out. He's the first person to do so. That's an extra level of bravery, I suppose, is the word there. I know it's a strong word, but he's got to go back to his job having done this now and deal with the higher ups and everything else. So fair play
Yeah.
to him for that.
He is
Yeah.
also not the first person to say that he hasn't had blowback. I know several other IC people who have reported this stuff, and they say, it's been fine for them. So it doesn't seem like everyone's equal. If you say a big thing, then you get a lot of blowback. If you say the general kind of wishy-washy thing of, we are not alone, then that's kind of
Yeah.
okay because they can wiggle their way around that.
Yeah. And maybe it's the behaviour around it as well. And I don't mean that in a positive or negative way, that someone's done the wrong thing. But
Sure.
perhaps if someone's pride more than was wanted, maybe if it is just a case of Jackson had an incident, he reported it properly, he went about this the right way, and he was like, I'd like to come forward and speak about this. That's fine. But then you've got a Matthew Brown who goes digging and really is unhappy about what he's found. A David Grush who was really unhappy about what he was hearing, what he found, rippled a few waves. That brings more of a retaliatory nature to it, depending on who you're
Sure.
exposed to and all that kind of stuff as well, potentially. Um, Borland says, and this is the word and stuff comes in here, that they won't confirm ET scientifically because we would need to go to their planet and basically see that ET species there to confirm that, oh, well, the blue avians come from Septali C because we know they come from there. And that's why they can get round saying, yeah, they're
You've
not
told people
ET
my
because
address now.
Septali C in Nevada. Um, but yeah, so I get that, and it's a misrepresentation of the full truth for that. So yeah, anything else on the
Yeah.
Gill time to Luna to Burleson?
I just wonder, the retaliation stuff. We always talk about the legacy program as if it's one thing, But if they are,
Mm.
their own thing unto themselves, and we bring into account how often these, heads of department and heads of organizations clash and they want their own kind of, spin off of it. I wonder if there is just one program or whether there's multiple working against each other. And the retaliation depends on which one you get. Some are nicer than others. Could well be.
Yep. Mr. Biggs comes in. Is it Andy Biggs, I believe? Trying to yes, Andy Biggs.
Yes.
He comes in. Remember him from the previous. I liked his statement about no matter your opinion on UAP, every member of the public should be alarmed by the testimony here today. So again, I like that, just bringing it back into the room. Regardless of videos, regardless of what you think, regardless of where you're coming from, this is something generally you should sit up and take notice of. Very much on the side of the whistleblowers, reminding us the title of the hearing is there for a reason. And again, folks, restoring public trust through UAP transparency and whistleblower protection. Biggs says we should look into Arrow, and Luna says with a smile she'd be happy to subpoena Kirkpatrick, and this gets a round of applause.
From
I'm
me
just not
too.
massive. I'm just not massively keen on the physical applause in the room. Little bit showy, and that was my thing. And people might be listening going,
Sure.
do you know what I mean? No, it's just like, come on.
Yeah.
And
I think
Borland
there
said,
was a
oh
lot
yeah,
of relief in the applause. Everyone's been
yes,
screaming for this to happen. So I think the room is full of UAP people. They're in this every day. So I think that's where it comes from. But also, yeah, totally. It kind of turns into a bit of a show, right? Like, is this theater or is this a serious discussion?
well, and that's it, because ultimately you're looking at people potentially talking about, oh shit, what was the word that I used before for Borland? Talked about treason, talking about death penalties, talking about imprisonment, talking about lying in under oath when it comes to Kirkpatrick, long-term imprisonment for people. Is it really a hooping and a hollering type setting? Probably not. And it
Sure.
detracts a lot. And then if you're a member of the public watching this for the first time, and say you've got a mate who is like a Gary Nolan type, he's, award-winning immunologist, and you're really trying to get him into the UFO topic, and he sits down and watches this and goes, why are they cheering and clapping at the name of someone being subpoenaed? There's just a look potentially to that. So again,
Yeah.
optics, Dan, is one of our favorite words, isn't it?
Optics. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Borland again repeats, I know what I know what I've seen, I know what's true. God bless him.
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially alluding to, if anyone talks about this and they hide anything, he knows that they're lying, which
Yep.
suggests he has like a level of proof or knowledge now that he didn't before. So, get him into a skiff. And Luna does say towards the end that, they're gonna get him immunity to get him into the skiff. We missed something that I just want to touch on. Mr.
Yeah, go
Perry,
on.
when he was speaking to Wiggins, he was kind of pushing the angle that they could be U.S. government things, craft, and he asks Wiggins, "Is it an accident that they showed you these objects? Because you seeing them suggests that maybe the government is okay just blowing their load on all of these." He doesn't say blowing the load, by the way. That's my language. On these kind of super secret craft, and they just wouldn't be doing that. So it by its very nature suggests something other. I thought that was important to bring up.
Yes, Nicholas Begich comes in. He asks Dylan Borland about why in a skiff information would or could be held from Congress. Borland's quite good with naming names too, and he says he would need to speak to the DNI, Director of National Intelligence. Yeah,
That's right.
Tulsi Gabbard about that. Begich then asks the panel if they would name the. I like this one because he really kept it really generalised across the
Mhm.
board, and he said, "Would any of you name the gatekeepers involved?" Knapp, I love it, is the first one to unmute, and you can kind of see them all sit back and cross arms and.
It looked like
Um,
this was the moment Knapp had been waiting for. Like,
yeah.
please ask me to name a name.
Do you think this was arranged beforehand, Dan?
Quite
Knapp knew it was
possibly.
coming. Yeah. So ask the panel if they would name gatekeepers. Knapp comes in to names Dr. James Ryder at Lockheed Martin.
Yep.
He adds he doesn't fault contractors for doing what they were asked to do by their bosses. The CIA told them to keep it quiet. These people a lot of them would like an off ramp on this, and that's something I've heard before. Ross Coulthart a while back was talking about that, wasn't he? That private contractors want to divulge themselves potentially of exotic materials they may have, and they're
Yeah.
looking for a way to do it because it's not as easy as going, I've got a UFO on this truck being delivered to Congress this week. Who do I give it to? So
Yeah.
yeah, that was the first name mentioned. He then asks again the whole panel if there's a security classification guide for UAP or NHI. Nusatelli says it's secret or above. Knapp comes back in and says, "Oh, Glenn Gaffney at the CIA," and Glenn Gaffney's a name that's been mentioned before on multiple different ways and platforms.
He has, yeah. Liberation Times, Chris Sharp over there brought it up. Matt Ford, if you go back and you look at the previous hearing and written statements submitted after the fact, Matt Ford submitted something that named Glenn Gaffney as well. So a lot of people are pointing at this guy. He was the director of science and technologies. Oh, the head of the director of science and technologies Office of Global Access. This is said to be the crash retrieval program, long arm reach across the whole world, with teams set up everywhere to get stuff, not all alien stuff or NHI stuff or
Yeah,
technology of unknown origin. Tohu, how do you even say that? I don't like that one. You can't abbreviate so
not the
much.
best one.
But this would be the guy that was in charge of it. So it looks like he's being pointed out now in a much more obvious way, and it's been creeping. It almost feels like when you watch a TV show and something comes back at the end that was mentioned in the beginning, and it's like, oh, finally, and then it cuts for season 2. It feels like that's where we're at. Finally, Glenn Gaffney has been named, and we've got to wait until next time.
Yes. And Burlison asks if the task force has authority to request subpoenas. Luna says there are ways to work around it, but they're also trying to get immunity for Borland and co. to talk without fear. I think that's something that's come up before, that the task force can't just issue subpoenas left, right, and centre. They don't have the power or authority to do it. They have to jump through hoops themselves, but there are ways and means to get it done. So,
They could be given the power to do it,
yeah.
but basically the way that it was made was that the Luna's boss, I forget his name now, but she has to ask him to request the subpoena. So what I'd really like to see is for the task force to actually be given the power to subpoena people without going through mum and dad.
Would that then affect all the task force stuff, though, i.e., Epstein, JFK,
Yes. And
and
that's
maybe
potentially
they
why they're
don't?
not being given it, right?
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
want you to see that we're giving you UAP stuff and trust us again. But also remember that Epstein stuff? See, we're being honest about UFOs, so we're being honest about that stuff now, right?
Mm,
Wink, let it go away.
yeah. Yeah, so Luna throws a swerve and gets another 30 minutes in for this. I'm not going to lie, at that point, Dan, I was like, oh Christ, this has been going on a long time, but it doesn't
Yeah,
last
right.
another 30 minutes, I don't think. You know when you go and see like a good movie and you're like, I'm kind of ready for it to end now and I'll be
Oh
happy.
God. I can't. There's so many movies I've seen where you're just like, yeah, that was a really good movie, and if it ended now, it would be great. And then there's another hour, and you're just
Yeah.
like, oh no.
Yeah, it happens quite often, but it wasn't awful. Luna asks Knapp about what percentage of Russian information he thinks is public. He says 1%, which is, yeah, awesome. Knapp says a number of programs existed in Russia for this. There were programs under programs under programs. She gets the Orb missile video replayed, totally forgot they'd done this, and asks the panel for their thoughts. My note here is I went to the loo, not sure what they all said. Um,
They just said I don't know, basically.
okay.
They need more information. That was the thing, and I think that's what everyone should be doing as well. They do
Yeah.
show the or Mr. Crane right after this asks Wiggins about his encounter and whether he saw the video and how other many witnesses there were, and he explains that people in the CIC, i.e., the bridge of the ship, they spoke about it, but it didn't really get past out of there. Um, Jeff's citing had multiple witnesses, and he says that Tim Gallaudet showed him the video, which that is new information to me. Apparently, Wiggins didn't see the video when he was there of the object. He was just aware of it, saw it on radar, saw it with his eyes. But yeah, now this video is out, and apparently it was Tim Gallaudet that did that. He testified in the
Um,
previous hearing, if people don't know.
yeah. And Representative Ogles comes in. Again, is it yeah, Andy? I knew there was another Andy.
Yeah, it's an Andy.
He interrupts the kind of lightning round they're doing for his 5 minutes. And he asks the panel if they were pointing the American people to one piece of evidence to investigate this topic. Don't think the answers here were particularly great. I think it was maybe when he put them on the spot a little bit. Jeff says, this hearing and the first hearing, the new video. Wiggins didn't really. I've not got what he said.
Jeff also said the sentence, "There is no evidence," which I've seen a lot of skeptics pick up on. But I think what he's speaking to is the fact that we're trying to get these protocols established. We can get the evidence that you want that would convince you out. Yes. But so there is no evidence. All we've got is this, you need to spend a lot of time looking at the evidence. And that question gets asked of me, probably you as well. Why do you believe in UFOs? Where's the evidence? And it's like, there's not one thing I can show you. But if I gave you all these reports from the 50s up to modern day, you'd come away realizing that there's something here and we can't explain it and it's being covered up. Beyond that, can't say. It's hard to, in 30 seconds, say that, right?
Knapp talked about the amount of evidence showing these things are not ours. He mentions the incident. He mentions the incident in Russia where they had 40 incidents where pilots were sent to intercept UFOs. Most times the things flew away. He does mention 2 pilots died trying to shoot these things down, and the government, because the aircrafts were stalled by the UFOs is the implication, and that isn't something the government wants out there. You start to go into that whole medical issues, pilots and military personnel have suffered, just normal civilians have suffered. That then goes into whole other time, Dan, other conversation. Abduction experiences, the genuine ones, can they do anything about those? Are they implicit in those happening? What's going on with abductions? And all of that gets opened up. Dylan Borland says Bob Lazar because they tried to discredit him. What did you think of Borland bringing up Lazar as the best evidence?
I knew you were asking me this because I'm skeptical on Lazar. I think it's fair. I think that specifically what Dylan said is completely agreeable. Lazar did take people out to see these lights going over the base on particular nights. So he knew what the schedule was for this. It's not just like some random thing that he was saying and then he's flying a drone back in the 70s out and he knew something was going on. He took people to show them, they filmed it, and he spoke truth. I've heard a lot of different theories about what that was that he was showing, whether they were craft or particle beam experiments and things like that. But the point is, Bob spoke the truth. He just didn't have all the information to kind of say what it was. And yeah, I commend Dylan for bringing it up because it highlights that, as I said, I'm biased against Bob because of, the way I lean on it. But it highlights that even if you feel that way about someone, it doesn't mean that everything they say is complete crap. There are things in there that are still true. There are still things in there that you have to incorporate and are relevant to the conversation we're having today. Even, we said earlier how kind of strange it was that Greer was there. And even the stuff that he said in the past, some of it's a bit iffy. But again, he's done some great work and there's some real stuff there, real witness statements, and so part of what he's saying is going to be true and genuine. So we can't just write people off because we just go, that bit you said, I don't believe. So therefore it's all crap.
It goes back to Tim Burchett to finish off. It gets Knapp and Borland talking about how Arrow split hairs around no proof of ET. Knapp says he doesn't know anyone who knows where they are from for sure. As a statement, Dan, Knapp said that before, but I think it's a fair. I like hearing that kind of stuff in these hearings because, again, I like to take a step back. I'm a member of the public. I'm watching this. Oh, this guy's just not coming out and telling us what we want to hear and telling us, oh, there's aliens and there's proof of it and this is where they're from. I like that. There's still a line, there's still a reservation to say, look, I might know a lot of stuff, or the inclination is George Knapp knows a lot of stuff through other people, but he's coming out and saying, I don't know anyone that knows for sure where these are from. And I like that because it gives you a sense of, okay, you're not going too far.
Yeah, absolutely. He also says about he says people working on this are the best of the best, and I think that's something that we often forget too in this community. You listen to Eric Weinstein talk about the UFO issue, and he says all our best scientists don't know about this. Why aren't you bringing them in? You're not going to bring in the best. You're going to bring in the people that'll stay quiet, that'll take the wage, and will do what you tell them. That isn't everyone. Like a lot of scientists, imagine like an environmental scientist, they're going to be fairly
Yeah.
liberal in their leanings, right? Like they're not going to take money from the government to have their work shut away. And then there's the whole ego part of it. Some scientists are going to want their Nobel Prize for this kind of stuff. And if they're not allowed to release the data, then they'll just be looked at as someone in the scientific community that hasn't released a single paper. They played with that in Stargate with the scientist that worked at the Stargate thing. He had all these incredible papers about this incredible technology, and everyone in the community just thought that he was, a lame scientist because he hadn't actually published anything in like 15 years, but he'd been working on this program. So there's a lot of facets that kind of come into it. And we have to remember that a lot of the people that work in these programs are in many ways, desperate. They're not the best of the best. We're not making progress on it, as George alluded to earlier, because they're not the best of the best. And, hats off to them. They're smarter than me. But if we want the best scientists on the planet working on this, then we have to give them a way where they can be transparent and file papers and go through that usual scientific process instead of just becoming someone shunned by the community.
I'm just going to give you my last 3 notes because that's me done. Tim Burchett says, Navy folks think deep sea areas need looked at. Lovely little drop in there from Tim as a sensational quote. Burlison finishes saying, enough talking, it's time for action. Luna finishes things up and says, 5 days for additional materials and questions as per normal. And that wraps up the hearings, Dan. Anything else you've got notes-wise?
Just Crockett's final line where she said, "Thank you for your courage. It's contagious." I think that's very true. And hopefully more whistleblowers see this happen and see people like Borland come forward, even currently active members of personnel. Hopefully more of them come forward and testify to the reality of this.
Yeah. Final thoughts then, Dan, because we've been going 2 hours now. Christ, so thank you for the time. Yeah, nearly the length
almost
of the
as long
hearing.
as the hearings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, did you say the same thing as me? Jinx.
Yeah, I did.
So cute.
There's probably 2 hours worth of questions. So, like I say, we'll get to that another day.
Sure.
Thoughts then, generally, where we are after this hearing?
Yeah, I think they made a great case for the stated reason for having this. The whistleblower protections need enhancement, and to a level unseen before, because this is all getting too crazy. The snowball is picking up speed. They're clearly fed up. I'm pretty sure I've heard senators in the previous hearing say, "Okay, enough talk now, time for action." But it felt kind of propulsive at the end of this one. It felt like, okay, whistleblower protection, then the next thing. It feels like a really actionable list. It was covered by CBS, Reuters, BBC. Like some of the coverage of the tone of the coverage was less than stellar. But what are you going to do? It's great that it's being covered on these outlets. And also, I would ask, after all of these questions, can Arrow be split off and made an independent organization yet? We've wanted this for years. And I think the senators and representatives are finally getting to a point where they realize that we need an independent organization to run this stuff. I look forward to what Luna has to say about Borland testifying in SCIF. I'm sure she can't tell us everything that she gets told. But also, I thought, we always at the end of these things, we say, okay, next witness, who we have testify. I feel like we got a list of people named by the witnesses today, mostly George Knapp, of people that they should get to testify. That is James Lukatsky, Jay Stratton, Colm Kelleher, is that how you say it? Kirkpatrick and Kozlowski from Arrow. Yep, Matthew Brown, Dr. James Ryder at Lockheed. I've said that we're due for someone from Lockheed to come forward and start talking. James Ryder would be the guy. He's been named. And also Glenn Gaffney. Let's get him in there. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 potential witnesses for a next hearing, many of whom people have been screaming out for them to testify. The only one I would add to that would be Hal Puthoff, because he's kind of been mixed in with all of this since the beginning, and also Bigelow as well, because he was mentioned a lot. So hopefully all those witnesses come forward. And for me, it's all eyes on the UAPDA now. And I recommend people get in touch with their representatives here in the US and just let them know, support this bill. It's important. We will be looking for that attached to the NDAA this month. But again, it could go in conference, and then the president's desk it gets to around December. So hopefully we'll see it there, and we'll finally be able to get this ball rolling.
I'm going to give it a few days. So when we come back on and do the questions and stuff, I'll kind of see where I'm at. The UAP Disclosure Act stuff could be telling if that doesn't go through at all, because
Agreed.
this for me was a third and done. It's got to, it's got to be. It goes through this time or it doesn't at all. The announcement from NASA, Dan, just to finish off on that. So NASA have basically come out and said the sample that Perseverance, the rover, took on Mars last year, and this ties in. They've analysed it now for 1 year, and the scientists that have done the analysing of the data, they can't come up with anything other than they think they've got proof of ancient microbial life. So, given what we're looking at in these hearings, and given that announcement, how does that tie in and impact things that you've had the hearings one day and then the following day NASA come out and say, oh, we maybe have proof of life? Because I just wonder, will that impact how people react?
Yeah, potentially, right? Like it's getting to a point now where, you know, if you are just in the pub and you say to someone, do you believe in aliens? Like it's more likely than ever that they're going to say, yeah, I don't think we're alone. And it's not a controversial thing to say anymore. Looking at James Webb telescope images and all the things that we do, seeing all the exoplanets out there, we have a much different idea to people even like, for example, Carl Sagan. He had no idea exoplanets existed. So when he was saying like life is not life out there, he was saying that with confidence because he had knowledge that there were no exoplanets out there. But just like the head of the astronomy society in, I forget, is Paris, like 200 years ago, he used to say there are no rocks in the sky, therefore they cannot fall from the sky. And when a farmer came in with a meteor and they said that it crashed into a field, they would be mocked and laughed at. Whereas now we have a much different idea about what's in space and what can come from there and land on Earth.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that we're at a point now where it's almost inevitable, whether it comes from science, whether it comes from an actual, you know, UFO group. I'm, and people can hold me to this. My idea changes every day. So yeah, don't be too harsh. But you can hold me to it. I think
that's fine.
In like 10 years, we'll just blanket be like, yeah, we're not alone in the universe. Whether that's microbes that are here before us, whether it's a civilization that's around now and just on another planet or visits us, doesn't matter. I think we will be all very accepting of the fact, Neil deGrasse Tyson included, that we are not alone in the universe.
Yep, I would agree. Folks, any and all thoughts and questions on that, please get in touch with us. Use the email address ufouapam@gmail.com or thatufopodcast.com/contact. Everyone who's commented on Patreon and the Discord and stuff, I can get stuff in there. If you want to resend the questions, that's fine. We'll go through them separately. I am flagging badly at this point. Dan, I'll give you the final word though for a change. Anything you want to mention at all before you head off?
It's a little shameless self-promotion from me, I think. My new show, What It Means to Be Human, comes out in the next few days. I'll try and give Andy links so we can include it here. But we're essentially kind of trying to turn the mirror on us. You know, we always talk about UFOs as if they're out there and something not affecting us. And we're kind of going to look at how the phenomena affects us and changes us throughout our lives and helps us understand what it means to be human. This question comes up a lot, whether you're watching Alien Earth or Lou Elizondo or anything. Like, it just comes up all the time. And that is why I chose the name. And so we'll be hitting first with just like a news roundup, very different. I'll introduce you to Roz, my co-host, a Canadian producer that works with Indigenous populations there, or communities, sorry, and brings like a really just different, refreshing perspective.
Awesome. What I'll do, Dan, since we've gone so long, like I say, I'll put the link in the description for Dan's show. Best of luck with that, with Roz. I'll release separately the 25 minutes with S, because that's like 2.5 hours now to upload, and the files start getting big as well, folks. So if you want to hear the breakdown and analysis of what S thinks the video may be, I'll release it separately, and you've just got the two shows there. So yeah, all good. Dan, thank you so much, and also obviously best of luck with the pod when it comes out. Finally, it's only days away. So again, folks, thank you very much for listening, and we'll speak to you very, very soon.